Hello students, once again I welcome you all. As you know, presently we are dealing with William Shakespeare's sonnet, "My mistress' eyes are nothing like the sun." And so far we completed a couple of stanzas from the poem, and in order to have a proper connectivity, I'll just read out the couple of stanzas first, and then I will proceed with the critical appreciation of the poem. Let us look at the poem. Please refer to your text. My mistress' eyes are nothing like the sun. Coral is far more red than her lips red. If snow be white, why then her breasts are dun? If hairs be wires, black wires grow on her head. I have seen roses damsek, red and white, but no such roses see I in her cheeks. And in some perfumes is there more delight than in the breath that from my mistress reeks. So these are the two stanzas that we have completed so far. And of course, in this class, the remaining 6 lines, that is 1 quatrain of 4 stanza, that is 1 quatrain of 4 lines, and followed by a couplet, I'll be able to complete. So students, one thing is all clear to you all now, that the poet has adopted the unconventional style of writing. If you really refer to the sonnets written by the contemporaries of William Shakespeare or the sonneteers of the Elizabethan period, you will find that all the sonneteers have appreciated the beauty of their beloved, and that too positively. Whereas Shakespeare has adopted the unconventional style of writing. Instead of positively appreciating the beauty of his beloved, there are so many elements, especially there are so many words which are making the ridicule of the situation. There are so many words which are just making the mockery of the beloved and her beauty. So let us look at the third stanza over here now. I'm not going to define everything that I discussed in my previous couple of classes. I'll focus on the last 6 lines of this poem in this class. Let us look at the poem. I love to hear her speak, yet well I know that music hath a far more pleased sound. Let us try to create some connectivity with the previous expressions which are made by the poet over here. As you know, right in the beginning, the lover says that his beloved's eyes are not at all like the sun. They are dull and dim. They are not as bright as the sun is. Later, he compared the color of the lips of his beloved with the color of the coral, whereas he found the color of the coral much better than the color of her lips. Likewise, in a very unconventional manner, the poet has talked about the beauty of his beloved. Later, in the subsequent stanza, we saw that the poet has talked about the color of the roses, damsek, red and white. And now he is trying to compare with the color of the cheeks of his beloved. He felt that the color of the roses is much better than the color of her cheeks. So here he continues the same line of writing and says in this particular one, that is the third stanza or the third quatrain of the poem. He says, in the third quatrain, the speaker refers to the tradition which a lady was often compared to a goddess. I mean to say, if you happen to refer to the other sonneteers of the time, you will realize that all the sonneteers have projected their beloved in such a way as if she is a goddess. But here, the poet is doing some unconventional adventure of writing with some mockery or a tone of mockery. He says that he has never seen a goddess walking by. His beloved, he is a human being, and she walks on the surface of the earth. She is not walking in the sky like a goddess. Right? Similarly, he continues to say, I love to hear her speak. Yet, well, I know that music hath a far more pleasing sound. I grant I never saw a goddess go, my mistress, when she walks treads on the ground. As I said before, in the very unconventional manner, the poet has talked about it. See the beginning of this particular stanza. I love to hear her speak. Of course, everybody would love to listen to the melodious song or the melodious sound or the melodious voice of his beloved. But how does the poet say here? Now he says, the speech of the mistress, that is the speech of his beloved, should be the sweetest sound ever. But according to him, it is not the case. Because the poet is making the opposite statements in this respect. Right? He says, the traditional sonneteer, when he describes positively, whereas this poet is going to describe negatively. The traditional sonneteer would describe the breath of his mistress to be the sweetest smell ever in the world. But here in this poem, the poet says that, or the speaker says that, he is simply making the opposite statements, and some perfumes are much more delightful than the breathing smell of his beloved. See the comparison made here. He is comparing the fragrance of a perfume, any kind of perfume, with the smell or the breath of his beloved. In fact, it should not be compared at all. The speech of the mistress should be the sweetest sound in the world. And it was defined likewise by other sonneteers of Shakespearean period also. But this poet, that is William Shakespeare, is not doing so and making the opposite statements in this regard. He says that though he loves her to speak to, but he knows that the sound of music is sweeter than the voice of his beloved. This sort of comparison is made by the poet. I refer to the poem, I love to hear her speak. Of course, being the lover of the beloved, I love to listen to her. When she speaks, I like it. But when it comes to the comparison with some other melodious sounds in the world, and if at all I compare with the melody of any kind of music, I find music much, much better than the voice or the speech of my beloved. In the subsequent expression, now you see how does the poet say, I grant, I never saw a goddess grow. I grant, I never saw a goddess go. It means the poet is making a proclamation that he has never seen a goddess in his life. But of course, he has seen his beloved. So, he is not going to compare his beloved with the goddess. One more comparison he has made here. My mistress, when she walks, treads on the ground. It means that the poet is trying to convey us that my beloved is an ordinary human being like you and me. He has never seen a goddess, so there is no question of comparing my beloved with the goddess. I never saw a goddess walking in the sky, and hence I am not going to compare my beloved with the goddess. I am not going to compare when my beloved walks. I am not going to compare her walk with the walk of the goddess there in the sky, because I never saw a goddess. But whereas I know my beloved, she is a common human being like you and me. The speaker's love for his beloved is very precious and valuable. It is rarest of the rare, no doubt about it. But as a matter of fact, the lover is not really willing to compare her beloved, who is a human being, with the godly things like a goddess. So here, this particular stanza, that is quarter number 3, is going to give us few more examples in the respect of writing this poem with the unconventional manner. If at all you happen to read the sonnets of Sir Philip Sidney or Edmund Spenser, you will realize that they have appreciated the beauty of their beloved in such a way, and most of the times they have even compared the excessive beauty of their beloved with the gods and goddesses. But here, our poet, that is William Shakespeare, is so practical in this respect and says that my beloved is an ordinary human being. Since I did not see any god ever or goddess ever, so there is no question of comparing my beloved with the beauty of the goddess. That's why he is not going to do that. And so he bluntly says, my beloved walks on the surface of the earth. My beloved does not walk there in the sky like a goddess. And here I refer to the text. I grant I never saw a goddess go. My mistress, when she walks, treads on the ground. It means I did not see any goddess walking in the sky because I never witnessed a god or a goddess. So I'm not going to compare my beloved with the goddess and the way a goddess could walk there in the sky. I saw my beloved, who is an ordinary human being. She lives on the surface of the earth and she walks on the surface of the earth. She could never fly like a fairy or a god or a goddess. So this is how all these 3 stanzas, that is quatrain 1, quatrain 2, and quatrain 3, are giving you one or the other examples in this particular context that the poet has adopted the unconventional style of writing. Okay, so this is how I could come to a conclusion as far as these 3 stanzas are concerned. Already I told you, sonnet is a poem consisting of 14 lines. Petrarchan sonnets are divided into 2 stanzas, octave and sestet. Octave means a stanza of 8 lines. Sestet means a stanza of 6 lines. 8 plus 6 is equal to 14. But this one is a Shakespearean sonnet or an English sonnet, you can say. This is divided into 3 stanzas followed by a couplet. 3 stanzas of 4 lines each. 4 3s are 12, followed by a couplet plus 2 is equal to 14. So far, we could complete first 3 quatrains or the stanzas of this particular poem. Now, I will switch over to the couplet, which is the concluding part of this particular sonnet. The poet says, and yet and yet by heaven, I think my love as rare as any she bellied with false compare. So one thing is all clear over here. Okay, the poet might not have compared the beauty of his beloved with the extraordinary things in the world. He might have been so straightforward. He might have been making the mockery. He may be using a ridiculous terms sometimes while comparing the beauty of his beloved. But one thing is clear here, that the poet has very clearly said that my love for my beloved is really very precious and valuable. It is rarest of the rare in the world. Here, in the final couplet of this sonnet, William Shakespeare declares that the comparison of his beloved with heavenly objects is not that important, because his beloved is beautiful, though she may not look extraordinarily beautiful. Hence, she needs not to be falsely compared with other beautiful objects in the world. And that's why the poet has said whatever is the reality. The poet has talked about whatever he felt about his own beloved. So in the last couple of lines, that is the couplet, the poet says that, and yet by heaven, I think my love as rare. Okay. So here he says that, yet by heaven, okay, whatever it may be, whether gods are there or not, goddesses are there or not, heaven is there or not, whatever it may be, I have not really witnessed or seen such kind of things in my life. Okay. But one thing that I strongly believe is my beloved is really a good one. She is a beautiful one. And I do love her. Okay. She may not be extraordinarily beautiful. And that's why I am not going to compare the beauty of my beloved with the extraordinary things in the world. So this thing is made very clear by the poet over here in the couplet. We could see that Shakespeare's views about love are very non-conventional here. The unconventional approach, as I said earlier, is the most significant aspect of this poem. Usually, a lady was loved for her physical appearance, and that is reflected in most of the poems written by different poets. But as a matter of fact, if you see, William Shakespeare did not use any decorative language in order to appreciate the beauty of his beloved. He has been so practical, so straightforward, and one thing he clearly says, that my beloved is an ordinary human being like you and me. So she need not be compared with any animate or inanimate thing in the world. The gods or goddesses that I never saw, how can I compare my beloved with the gods or goddesses? Whatever I know, like the physical, phenomena which are available in the nature, that I try to compare. Simply, the poet has said, my beloved, okay, is not bright like the sun, or the eyes of my beloved are not bright like the sun, because I could see the glow of the sun, I could see the brightness of the sun, and when I compare the brightness of the eyes of my beloved, I found it very dim, or else I found them very dim and dull. So no one can have more brightness than the sun as such. So why do I appreciate unnecessarily? In the subsequent expression, the poet has also said that the cheeks of my beloved are not like the red or pink or white rose as such. He accepts the reality that the color of the flowers much better than the cheeks of my beloved. When this is the harsh reality, why do I unnecessarily appreciate, adulate, and praise my beloved whereas she is not? So this is the approach which is adopted by the poet over here, and very strongly throughout the poem, the poet has presented the humorous tone of a kind of mockery that he has done throughout the poem. The humorous tone of the poem actually dominates throughout the poem, I would say. If you really carefully go through the each and every word of the poem, you will realize that this particular poem is full of poetic devices. Especially, there are the similes, the comparisons which are made by the poet over here. And if you go through the poem in the structural point of view, as I said, it has got 3 quatrains, 4 lines each, that is 4 threes are 12, followed by a couplet that is stanza of 2 lines. In all total, there are 14 lines only. And if you minutely study the rhyming scheme adopted by the poet, you will find that AB, AB, CD, CD, EF, EF, and the couplet has the rhyming scheme of GG. So this is the rhyming scheme which is adopted by the poet over here for this particular poem, right? So from my end, this is the critical appreciation of the poem. I believe that you have really enjoyed learning this particular poem from me, and for your proper connectivity and better understanding, my humble request to all of you to watch the previous videos that I developed for this particular poem. Couple of or 2 to 3 videos are there. Watch them all in continuity in a row so that you will understand this particular poem in a better way. So thank you very much for this patient listening, and see you in the next class tomorrow.